Welcome everybody to the Scale Up Show. This is your host Ryan Staley, and I have a very special guest with me today. I have Angelina Lawton. Angelina is a trailblazer in the sports business world as the CEO and founder of Sportsdigita. She has transformed the way over 450 of the biggest brands in the world sell globally. After early wins, Digitech quickly grew in popularity, now serving 50% of all pro teams in the 5 U.S. sports leagues, also working with a lot of enterprise B2B companies as well. Angelina, welcome. Happy to have you on the show.
Thanks, Ryan. Excited to be here. I've been watching you for a while, so I'm excited to be here with you.
That means a lot to me. It hits me right here. So I appreciate with the love right off the bat. Excited about you too. I mean, you're doing some amazing things. I know Forbes recognized you as one of the 30 most powerful women in sports. And then you've done a lot of other really cool things. So I'm excited to get into this. Like I mentioned in the pre-show, I love having women founders on and that have SaaS companies. And so really excited to hear your perspective and kind of how you got to this point. So real quick, before we go into your background though, I'd like to do a quick revenue rundown, just to understand where you're at in the stage of the journey. So can you just give us an idea in terms of where you guys are at in terms of your ARR?
I would say for our AR, well, I'm going to go back a little bit. I'd like to talk about our journey right now as far as a baseball game. And so I would say for us, we're in about like the bottom of the 6th, top of the 7th.
Okay.
Just as far as where we're trying to get to. And I would say our revenues are north of 10 million.
Okay, awesome. And then what's your primary go-to-market strategy for growing the company?
Well, because of how we started in sports, it really has been inbound mostly. A lot of referrals, a lot of, someone used us somewhere, brought us somewhere else. But we've expanded on that quite a bit as far as doing, we've got an inbound team, we've got an outbound team, and obviously a lot of demand gen, things like that. But how we started in the first couple of years, first 5 years, was a lot of just inbound.
Oh, love that. So obviously your product's amazing. I've seen it. It looks really, really detailed and just visually aesthetic. Have you, a quick question while we're on it, I usually don't go down this route now, but you got the inbound, you systemize that. Did you systemize customer to prospect referrals?
Yes, we did. I mean, we've got a lot of really good referral programs. I mean, as far as like inbound and outbound, we're just trying to do both right now. So.
Okay. Love that. So let's get into that later because that's unique. A lot of companies haven't done that yet. So let's talk about your team. How large is your team?
So we are hovering around that 90 to 100 employee mark. And that's here based in Minneapolis. And then also we've got New York and Texas and Georgia.
Okay. And then walk us through, and I know I touched upon it a little bit, but your solution, like what it is, who it serves, and can you just kind of do it in a paragraph, verbal paragraph, if you will?
Okay, yes. So our name is Sportsdigita. Our product is DigiDeck. It's really like what we call our crown jewel. And the DigiDeck is a cloud-based presentation builder. We do customized design master decks. We have integrations with Salesforce, other types of, BombBomb. We do a lot of sports integrations. So we have open API, so we're constantly evolving, really agile roadmap. So basically it's an elevated presentation. So think PowerPoint, but on steroids for anything. A lot of management reports, a lot of analytics, just a lot of really great souped up ways to support and present. Okay.
I can see the value in that. We, back when I was running an enterprise team, we literally had like it was kind of like a Franken deck that we put together of like our best hits, right?
Yeah.
And then we would save it on a template in like a cloud format for iPads. So it would have been sweet to have something like what you're talking about because it was like the most basic of basic approaches. So love that. And then walk us through if you're like bootstrapped or funded.
We were bootstrapped up until very recent. So we were self-funded until about 2019. And so now we have taken on a small round of kind of friends and family from Peak 6 out of Chicago. Matt and Jenny Halsizer are running point on that for us.
Love that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited.
So that's a perfect segue to the next question. So the fact that you bootstrapped until a few years ago, I think is absolutely amazing. And would just love to hear your journey on how you did that, how you made that a reality. And let's kind of start there.
Okay. My journey started again, I have another sports analogy because I do get asked this question quite a bit. So it's a little bit easier for me to talk about it. But so basically, like, I would say my journey is built into like a hockey game, 3 periods. My first period was working in the financial world. That's where I started originally. I worked for a company out of London. My father actually was a CEO, so I worked there for about 8 years. I ran point on all of their corporate communications, their marketing, presentations, all that good stuff. So that was like really what I did in the beginning years when I first got out of college. My second period, if you will, was when I started working in the NHL. So that was my, what I term like, first is like my Wall Street years. Second period is my my NHL years. And there I was their kind of senior director of corporate communications there as well. So anything with the brand, the logo, whether it was, presentations, helping them with, huge pitches, down to the Ice Girls, who was picking that in-game presentations. So anything with that brand or logo went through me, which was really, really a huge amount of responsibility that I was just so ready for. Because between the first period and the second period is when I had my kids. So I had a little break in there, cleared the ice. But so I was really ready to get back to work. So when I was there for about 3 years, and kind of like a little personal backstory. But so basically, the owners of the Lightning are who hired myself. My husband was the GM. So that really is how I got my opportunity. They hired me on. We were there for 3 years. We got new owners. New owners want a new coach and a new GM. And so we were from Minneapolis, my husband and I, who I married. He was a professional hockey player.
Nice.
He was let go. So not fun. And I loved my job. And I was like, oh crap. Okay. I have to quit because they're like, obviously a new owner wants their own people. So I thought to myself, okay, what I'm doing for the Tampa Bay Lightning, I can do for any team. I had really learned the ropes there as far as how budgets happen, how approvals get done, how teams work as far as for their naming rights or anything, ticketing, sponsorship. I had learned everything, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. So we moved back to Minneapolis, and that's when I started Sportsdigita. And so my third period is really just like my entrepreneur / Sportsdigita years. And so that's where I'm living right now. And so I've been at this since 2011. So up until now, so that's like 11, almost 12 years that I've been working on Sportsdigita. So that's where we're at now. We work with over, I think it's up to over 500 teams now. And then on top of that, now we are going outside of sports into, like the enterprise side.
Love that. So, so when you started, right? Like, cause that's, first of all, like, how did you go from 0 to 1? Like find product market fit. And then did you self-fund the product as well? Like, would love to hear just kind of that 0 to 1 story.
0 to 1. So basically I was acting as an agency first. So it was the first couple teams that I worked with was Minnesota Twins, Detroit Red Wings, and then Minnesota Lynx. And so what I was doing is they were hiring me to help them with their presentations. They were used to be called microsites. And so kind of a little bit, not very formal, but just doing these one-off projects, just like an agency would, nothing productized. So it just happened to be that when I did do this project for the Minnesota Twins, it was a presentation. They did really well. They were able to, gain the business. It was a great deal. And sports is a herd mentality. And so in Major League Baseball, if something good happens, Major League Baseball is really good about this. They're very much, they keep their clubs all informed of cool stuff going on, especially technology. Nice. And so what happened was, what I did for the Twins, other people started to understand and to want to be like, okay, I want this. I'm tired of doing PowerPoint. Our stuff is terrible. Sports is so sexy. Sports is so cool. How can we convey that in a presentation? You're selling naming rights. You're selling, whether it's like, Subway throwing out the first pitch or whatever they're doing. They just want to have a better way of doing it. So that's what happened. I mean, and it was like we moved from, I would say those first 3 teams in the first year to like 20 in the like kind of second year. And like for us, I mean, when you first start, sports is so impossible to get into. So unless you understand the inner workings of a team, it's just impossible. So I got really lucky. And what I did, what my kind of secret sauce was of how I was able to do that, is I hired two sellers that worked at teams that had really good networks, because sports, that's how it is. And so
Nice.
we literally, I remember I had an intern, and we literally went through the five major leagues, because at that point, that's what I was setting my mind to, was the five leagues. Now we know that sports is way bigger now. Not like PGA Tour is a big client of ours, F1, NASCAR, all those kind of peripheral kind of type of sports is much bigger. But we literally went through and made a database, handmade the database. Who was the director of ticketing? Who was the director of sponsorship? And like literally, that was before, HubSpot, Marketo, all that stuff. We were like literally just doing that like in MailChimp, stuff like that. So that's kind of how it started, how it went from 0 to 1.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. And so let me ask you this question, because like you've done really well to get to this point. It sounds like you just had a bad situation that you turned into a really good situation, right? You kind of got forced out of a position and decided to do your own thing, and now you're a founder, killing it later. So I guess like let me ask you this though, and what would you say is like, because and I'm going to preface this with like,
Okay.
there's so many ups and downs that are never talked about, right? Like in the entire process of startups, like you look at TechCrunch and it's always like, oh, this round of funding, this, right? So what would you say is like the single hardest moment through your journey that you're going through? And then like, what did you do to get through that and then come through the other side of kind of where you're at today?
So it's a great question. It's one I'm asked quite a bit. And I would say in those years at the beginning, from 2011 to 2015, when I did not realize that I was a tech company, a software company, I thought I was acting as an agency. I was, hiring like a developer one-off here and trying to do stuff. And it's like, I'm a non-technical founder. Okay. And
Yeah.
so I was literally trying to run a dev team and productize the DigiDeck without any knowledge. It was like just completely like, it's a cliche. I was building the plane and flying it at the same time. I will never forget like going down to, we had something, the Seahawks had come on board, and that was like one of our first NFL teams. And I was, thrilled to be working with them. And I remember I had one developer, and he would ride his bike to work, and he literally did not come in the day that we were supposed to present to the Seahawks. And like I literally went over to his house, and because he was like, his bike had a flat tire, I literally went over there, picked him up. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't. So it's just like, I would say just not being savvy enough to understand that this whole kind of software was taking on a life of its own. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And if I know now what I knew then, I don't know if I would have done it, So how I righted the ship was really honestly hiring Corey Factor, who is our president, who I've worked with for 8 years. He literally came on and was like, I think that and then I was trying to do servers at the same time and stuff like that. Like it was, our servers went down that day. I was happening to interview Corey that day. During our interview, he left the interview to go and figure out like how he could get my customers up and running. I mean, it was such a SHIT show. So anyway, that was how I righted the ship, was by hiring Corey. And he's like, he's our president, and he runs really, he's like our CTO / president.
Okay. And that was the turning point, it sounds like, because
totally turning point. It was from then on.
I
he
could
brought
see
on
trying
his
to piece
own
it together
dev
as a
team.
non-technical founder is
The
tough.
guys that work here now are people that have worked for Corey for years and years, and they're like 20 plus years together. And so it's a great group of guys. And I do have one female developer, which I'm happy about.
That's awesome. So what would you say, like, and I think that's a great story. So like, I guess kind of fast forwarding a little bit. Now, like at the stage you're at now, what's actually, I got so many questions for you. I don't know where to go sometimes. All right. So this one, like, I guess like working in sports is a totally different dynamic, right?
Yeah.
And same with the corporate world, I guess. Like, what's the weirdest thing that you've seen on the sports side from working with sports people?
I wouldn't say the weirdest thing, but the most like shocking thing to me is the biggest brands in the world you would think are really brand buttoned up, like marketing buttoned up. And I can't tell you how many times, and I didn't expect this. I can't tell you how many times, like, I will be talking, like, for instance, like the New York Yankees are probably our biggest client. They use us like all across the board of their organization. They, I remember one time we were putting a deck together for them, and they had asked, we were asking them like about their fonts, we were asking them about like branding and whatever, and they're like, well, we don't really have that. Can you pick that? And I was like, sure. But like, you don't think about that. And then this is like, they're all self saying this. This is not me like saying like, they don't like, they're all like saying this, like, okay, we are embarrassed to show our PowerPoint, not just Yankees, but like other people. You would think the biggest brands in the world are totally like have their stuff together, and they don't. And that's why it's like there's been a need for us, because these guys are just like have huge brands. They are busy selling. They're busy with what's on the field, and they just need help. And so that's been the kind of good and bad, but kind of shocking to me that they, that's where we're at. And so, and it's it could be like a big Fortune 500 company. They're like, oh, like they're embarrassed to turn their decks over, you know. And it's just because people just don't have time, and so that's why we're filling that gap for people.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, like, so one of the things that I exactly what you're talking about, the Fortune 500 company, we're working with one, they're about like 17 billion.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm not gonna say the name of the company, but they had, I don't know, 50 different regions for what they were doing, like just organizationally.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe 7 different divisions or something across those 50 regions. And so what happened was, there's some divisions where uh, basically every division was doing their own thing.
Yeah.
So think of that, and it wasn't 50, it was 500. So think of 70 and then expand it out to 500. So every segment was doing their own thing, and then there was some that even every single, like, of those 500, maybe 50 of them, every single one of those 50 was doing their individual own thing. And
Yeah.
that was like a big Fortune 500 company. So like, it totally doesn't surprise me when you get down to Dex, like how
Right.
it's going to be all over the place.
Right. And
Um,
so and that brings up a good point. So another one of our bigger clients on the enterprise side is BDO. And for that reason of what you just said is literally why they bought one of their head of their sales of their partners, one of their biggest divisions. They're like, I don't know what Asia's doing. I don't know what, France is doing. Like, I need to know what everyone's doing. So that's the beauty of our platform. Like, it all lives in one master deck. So all the analytics, you can see what everybody's doing. All the marketing assets are in there. All the content is in there. It's all been approved by their marketing. So that's the beauty of it all. So that's just, I mean, obviously, like, to have a great presentation visually that looks great is one thing, but then like what happens behind it when you send it? What are the analytics? Who's got access to it? So it's a great use case as far as for that what you just mentioned.
well, thank you. And let me ask you this, like, what would you say is like the most insightful analytics that you see from your solution? Like, I'd be curious because I have some ideas and assumptions I make, but what's like the most insightful outcomes and insights that people get from using your product?
Well, I mean, so we've got pretty good analytics as far as like when it's open, what pages they're on, what they're focusing on. But what we like the best is like when it gets forwarded, when they're opening it, like if it's open somewhere else, like that's important. So I mean, that's pretty good insight. Right now, we just did a project for a Hollywood studio out of LA, Twisted Pictures. They're selling their Saw franchise and all that, and they were raising money, and they used our deck to raise money, and that was pretty cool because they were sending it, and they couldn't send it unless they had to input like their user authentication. Just how it got, the people that they ended up doing the deal with was someone that we didn't even send it to, that got sent from somebody else, and we knew how it got sent. So it was like really cool stuff, and just what they were focused on. They were focused on a different part of the business than what Twisted Pictures thought. And so the deal that they're doing now is pretty cool.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I can see that happening across, I don't know, maybe 15 different use
Yeah.
cases with that as well.
I'd love to hear your ideas though too. offline
Yeah,
or
well,
now or whatever.
like let's say real simple, like an enterprise deal. Often what happens is, can you track it down to the email,
Yeah.
or like what's the level? What's the deepest level of tracking it gets down to? You don't
Um,
have to share it if you don't want to
no, I
publicly
mean, no,
state.
on email, like for sure by
Okay.
email.
Yeah. So let's say that, right? So let's say you're working a deal and it's $1 million plus a month,
Yep.
or 2 million plus a month. What happens is I could see like you get that in there and it gets sent off to people. Like here, I'll give you a real world example. We were working on a deal that was $18 million, right? Worked on the deal for 2 years. It was a 32-person RFP. And we essentially lost that deal.
Okay.
The reason why we lost that deal is because we found out there was one person that it was shifting to at the end, after they consolidated all these budgets and everything, to a new player that we didn't even know about.
Oh,
And so if we would have had your product, we would have
right.
identified that super early in the process,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then been able to course correct and then
Yep.
possibly save an $18 million deal. So you could use that story like
I
it
love
really
that
happened.
story. I love it. The Ryan Staley story. I'm in.
So yeah, we could talk more. I'll give you some other ideas too.
Yeah. And I mean, just on the analytics front, it's funny because analytics, you know, you hear the words like so many things, but what we find, even like a BDO, or like, you know, I don't know, like Kaiser Permanente, they just are looking for from us just kind of basic analytics. We're not trying to overcomplicate things. We're just kind of, you know, just when did they open it? What, you know, kind of stuff like that. So it also helps for people, the analytics, when you're putting together a presentation. So for instance, for us, like we've got our deck itself is probably like, I don't know, 60 to 75 slides. And when we send it out, we know what people are looking at and not. So then we just cut those slides. So that's like a way for internally for our own selves to become better.
Love that. Love that. Okay, so let's shift gears real quick. So talk to me about how you systemize referrals, because that's not very commonly done. So how do you do that? Like, what's the incentive structure, and just like how did you orchestrate that for your team?
So you're saying to me, like, you're asking me, like, when a lead comes in, what do I do with it?
I'm talking more along the lines of like leveraging existing customers to generate pipeline. Have you
Okay.
done anything like that or
I
no?
mean, we have a referral program. So like if someone comes in, I mean, it's not very sophisticated at all. Like if we have someone that comes in through another referral, we like there'll be an incentive. I don't know what they do on the sales side for how much they pay for that, but like we're not doing, it's not very formal, but I don't know. Is that the answer?
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's just kind of high level. So we don't need to get that makes sense. I guess
So like if someone comes in on inbound, typically they will come in through like a demand gen function, like a motion that way. Um,
gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
customer referrals you're talking about.
Yeah. So
So like when
what I yeah. So that's because word of mouth is hard to track, right? So if
I've
you
got
got
it,
them coming inbound, then
she's giving me an example. She's saying when the Kaiser Permanente came in through the Atlanta Braves, how did we compensate? Is that yeah?
yeah, that'd be great. Like just like how do you structure it, and how do you motivate people to provide more referrals? I guess is kind of what I'm
Okay.
getting at.
Yeah, so I think I don't know what the percentage is that they do, but it's something. But I don't think that it's like a huge part, but we do offer that, and it happens quite a bit. So
Okay. How about like growing the business now? You've done a lot of great things. Like, what would you say is the single biggest challenge that you're running into growing the business at the stage you're at right now?
um, I would say just moving up market for us. You know, we've done really well in sports, we've done really well in SMB, but we're trying to move up market, and that's always there's a lot bigger players there. Um, so that's kind of where we're living right now as far as trying to crack that code. And
Are you
obviously, like AI is on the horizon, and we know it's surrounding us, and we got to figure out what to do with it. We're going to have our first iteration of Chat GPT in our product second week of May. You know, we're going to tiptoe into this, but we've got about 6 or 7 motions that the dev team is working on how we'll incorporate that into our product. So just as simple as for right now, when people come on board, so let's just say Churchill Downs, like Kentucky Derby, they came on board a couple of months ago, and them or anybody else, the hardest part of onboarding onto our product is the content. And everyone's like, I don't have enough images, or I don't have video, or I need help, with the outline and all that good stuff. And so what we've done now is that we're going to incorporate the chat GPT at the beginning function of onboarding. So we're going to be able to give them, like they're putting together a slide. Now they're going to be able to put that in there, and they don't have to wait to think about all these ideas and what to do. So that's kind of our first kind of iteration into that. But just to be able to have a drop down on each of our slides, I think is going to be really helpful. It will help our, onboarding go quicker, having them adopt the product quicker, which is obviously super important. And then even seeing it further, eliminating churn, because if they don't use it, they're not going to renew it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's a great use case. Are you doing anything with graphics as well, with like Midjourney or
I know that you said
stability?
that on your last podcast. I know that they're looking into Midjourney. Because we were talking about that internally here after you brought that up. Not yet. We're focusing on the content right now as far as just the text and things like that. But our AI will be pretty integrated with our analytics. I know that they're talking about that, so I'm not sure what Corey has in store. But so right now, I mean, we should have a lot more AI in our product, I would say by end of June. But like we literally like our about face on like everything. We're just like, okay, let's go back over here to AI and let's figure out what we're going to do, because we know obviously, I mean, we don't want to be our heads in the sand on it. But we don't think like our stance on AI though is that we do think that there's always going to be that human component. And so we want to be able to stick with that, as far as like, you mentioned that there's products that will just put together your presentation. I still think there's that whole element of the human, of guiding the brand, guiding the images, guiding the content. But if you're looking for something like from scratch to write about something, I think that's awesome.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And I'm not
I
trying
think
to fight it. I'm just going to try to figure out how to embrace it.
that's good because there's kind of like a mixed bag response you see on it, right? There's
Yeah.
some people that are totally um, embracing it, and there's
Yeah.
other people like, oh, well, we'll get to it when we get to it, and
Right.
you're just like, they're going to be in trouble,
No, and I think I mentioned this too when I was out in LA last week or the week before, I can't remember, but I was at the conference on the Sports Business Journal's World Sports Congress. All like just all the C-levels in sports. Adam Silver was there, like all Gary Bettman, all those guys, and everyone is literally. It's like all the buzz in the whole entire conference was just about AI and what are you doing with AI? And teams want to understand, because teams are, again, they want to be progressive. They want to figure out how to make that happen. So this is just such a big topic.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, exciting and a little scary at the same time.
Right.
But so Angela, unfortunately, we are up on time. Where can people find you? Where can they find out more about your company? And then we'll wrap it up.
Yep. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, and then sportsdigita.com or thedigideck.com.
Love it. Well, it was really awesome having you on the show, and I loved your perspective. I love your journey, and
Thanks.
congrats on making it through the other side and thriving.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
All right. We will see you all in the next episode.